today we're going to look at the different ways you can use a pen or a pencil to create marks. You're going to set your page out like this, and you can see that on the left hand side I've put the key things that I want you to learn today. So the first is that artists make marks in different ways. The second is that pencils come in a different hardness. Some are softer and some darker than others. And how I hold my pen or pencil affects the mark I have made. So you find out what kind of pencil you've got by looking on the bottom here. Sometimes it says HB, sometimes it says 2B, 3B. Basically HB is your average in the middle pencil. It's like a hard, soft pencil. I've got some that go all the way up to 9B and they make a very, very soft mark. You can see that this one is 3B. For today's task, I'm going to be using an HB, a 3B, a 2B, and I might use a different HB just to see what kind of different marks they make. I'm also going to use two different pens. This one is like a ballpoint pen, but very soft. This one is a felt pen, and this one is an ordinary handwriting biro pen. I've used a ruler to grid my page up, so I've got lots of different spaces to work on, and I've kind of penciled in the title for the task so that I knew that the words were going to spell okay across the page. So the idea is that for homework or in class, if you work fast, you're going to create a title page which says artists make marks in different ways. So I've penciled them in here and you can see the kind of scale and surface that it's going to be. So it's going to give me lots and lots of space for adding a wide variety of different marks. Now I know that I can work really quickly and you might be a little bit more nervous about this, but it is really just about having a bit of fun. So just to show you before we start, this is my example that I made earlier. So I've got artists make marks and I've decided to use some felt pens. So I've got a different colour for each word, but I've also varied the textures and marks of the surfaces that I've used. And I drew my squares on here the opposite way around. So I've got lots of different marks and surfaces. These are all done using pen. The only pencil that I have on here is a little bit of shading on these marks, on these letters here, on the word marks. I've got somewhere I've worked here and I've actually used my pens to write and write words as well as drawing textures and surfaces, and somewhere I've cut little bits of paper up that I've drawn on beforehand. Somewhere I've just written the key words, which are about pattern and line and repetition, and about working in monochrome, and I quite liked just a little square of red just to see how it worked there. I used a frame over the top to keep it clean, but you don't have to do that. You can use a ruler. And what I've done here is just using those basic tools that I've got to the side of me here. I've had some fun trying to create different lines, different tones, different patterns and different shapes. In your sketchbooks, if you have a look here, at the front, we're going to be covering the idea of shape. Shape is a two-dimensional, so we're working in squares and we're going to, inside those squares, create a lot of different lines in order to create shape and in order to create tone. And we're also going to try and create some texture and surface. Now you might want to work quite free and you might want to make some patterns. So I'm going to start first with an HB pencil. If I hold my pencil upright like this, I can create quite hard, sharp marks, and you can see that I've got very, very little movement in my hand. So I'm trying to really kind of fill my square with lots of short, hard marks, while trying not to make it look like anything. So it's just filling this shape all the way to the edges with little dashes and marks. I'm keeping my pencil upright all of the time so that I've got quite good control over it, but also because I'm holding it like this, I can only make really short movements with my fingers, otherwise it starts to get quite painful. You can create more variety and tone by making these marks closer to each other in some parts of the page, which I'm going to do now. So I've got some down here where I've got them quite far apart, and some here where I'm repeatedly starting to make marks in the same kind of area. Now some of them are slightly crossed over, And I could, if I wanted to, just to vary it and perhaps change the patterns and the surfaces, create some marks going in the other direction. So I've still got my pen the same way, and you notice I can push that way or I can pull back, and they will give a different kind of mark to my surface. I'm going to take it all the way up to the edges, and it's almost created a stripe across the top there, which I quite like. So my marks were just using my fingers like this. I'm now going to move that kind of movement with my pencil, turn my pencil over, same kind of mark, but this time I'm going to use the side of the pencil, and you can see it creates a much softer effect. Exactly the same pencil, no different to it at all. But this time I'm going to draw some longer lines, and where they overlap each other you get quite a darker shadow to it. And I'm going to keep all of my marks this time in the same direction. I'm not going to turn my pencil around and use them in any other direction at all, just this way. And I'm trying really hard just to make those short marks using my pencil on the side. I might even turn my pencil all the way over, and perhaps down here I'll do one, and here I'm just going to try to shade. And you see, if I do this, the lines are gone completely. In art, it's never a good idea when you're trying to shade to lick your finger and rub it over it, because it adds the oils from your fingers and it just makes a mess of your work. See how dark it is here and how light at the bottom? I'm just going to go back and put a second layer over the top to create a stronger shadow, but I'm trying really hard not to let any lines show. So gradually building up this shadow, and this is all the time this is just my HB pencil. But you can see how different the marks can be, and I want to mix up pen and pencil on the same page, so I haven't done them side by side. I've created some separation of marks. And then finally for this pencil I'm going to work using my wrist, so I've got a much more jagged mark, and I'm trying to create something that's much more dynamic and got a much more rounded mark to it. So this time I'm going to fill my space and gradually create like tangled wire. So there's a continuous line. I'm not taking my pencil off at all. It's just one long line all the way around, and I will keep going until it feels the right kind of detail, and perhaps gets to the point where I start not being able to really see very much white paper left. So we've got some very different marks made with one pencil. If I then change my pencil, so this time I've got a 3B pencil and I'm going to make similar kind of marks, but this time I'm going to try and do a bit of cross hatching. So I'm going to take my pencil here and I'm going to try and go all the way across the page in one confident mark, and hopefully you can see that I'm not moving my fingers very much, all the movement's in my wrist. If I've got areas where I think are a bit too far apart, I can come back and fill them in. And by making more lines closer to each other, it's making this side look much darker than the other side. And I'm then going to turn it around and work in the opposite way. Now, 3B pencil gets blunt much faster. It's very soft, it wears down, and this was a really sharp pencil, but it's starting to be quite blunt now. So I'm hoping you can see how very different that mark is to this one. It's much softer and it's much darker, and I'm kind of coming back and filling in spaces. So you're going to have a go and try lots of different ways of working with pencils. Once you've done the pencils, the next thing is to have a go with pen and mix them all up. So what happens, I quite like to fill my space with lots of different spaces and lots of different textures, and I'm repeating some of the marks that I've already made with pencil, but this time I'm doing them with a pen just to see what it does and how it works. What is different about it? What kind of textures and shapes and colours can I get when I work using just my pen, and a repetition of kind of some squares and some rectangles, and then I'm filling them in with the sort of marks that I made here and here. So for this piece I'm just filling them in with cross hatching and horizontal and vertical lines so that it fills up the whole of my square. And then I'm going to use it in exactly the same way I used here, and then I'm going to try a different pen and see what that different pen looks like. And the aim is to try and get as many different surfaces and marks as you possibly can, using a pencil and using a pen, to show off your skills and show off your creativity and how many different kinds of marks you can possibly make. It's quite therapeutic to do this. It's quite relaxing, it's quite creative, and you can kind of switch your mind off a little bit. But if I take this pen and then do this mark that we saw here, where I'm just making the same scribbling mark round and round, making sure that I don't go too far over the edges. I can't stay exactly in the line because the line is geometric square hard lines with a 90-degree angle, and this is a round mark. But look at the contrast between this piece that I'm doing in pen now and the different marks that I've got here. How very different it makes the surface. You've got lots more light and shadow, and this is much grayer. So have some fun today. Come up with as many different ideas as you can to try in here. If you've got different pens, try them, see what a biro does, see what a soft gel pen does, see what happens if you move your hand from the wrist or you move your hand from the arm. See if you can get a pen as absolutely as pale as you possibly can. So a very, very delicate line that moves, and you might want to use things like bark or fish or water or anything that you think might give you some ideas for how to fill these surfaces in. But show off as much as you possibly can how creative you can be. And then for homework, use some of these techniques to fill your artists make marks in different ways title page. I look forward to seeing what you do with it. Good luck.